Mac Power Users, episode 641, Catching Up with Federico Viticci. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks, and I am joined by Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I'm really good. More importantly, we have a special guest on today. The guest that I never allow my wife to listen to because she thinks he has the best voice in podcasting. Welcome to the show, Federico.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been too long. You know, we've talked about getting you on, but you're such a busy guy, and I know, like, as soon as WWDC hits, you kind of go into your tunnel, into your review tunnel.
He goes to the beach. Come on, he's going to the beach.
Yeah, well, I told you I would love to be on. Just make sure that it's before WWDC, and I'm all yours. And you were kind enough to make it happen in mid-May, which is perfect. Just perfect timing. Yes.
Yeah. Are you excited for WWDC?
Well, how could I not be, right? I mean, it's the single most important time of the year for my work, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that and September when the things actually come out, but June is the big reveal. It's like Christmas for what we do, you know. And I'm especially intrigued this year to see what happens on the iPad. Maybe we can talk about that later. But I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, obviously, but also frustration from some users who have gotten tired of waiting for iPadOS to get better. And so if it actually gets better this year, I'm intrigued to see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like it's me. I've uninvested from iPad, and this will be the year that they fix it because of that.
Yes. And that chaos that will happen is why I'm here. Like, I want to see what happens. And I count myself in this audience. Like, I've sort of gotten tired of waiting for the iPad to get better. But what if it does? Like, what does it mean? And how can it get better? Like, will we reconsider? So that that's sort of the energy that I'm bringing into WWDC this year. Like, what if they actually do it? Then what?
Yeah, and we actually are not covering WWDC in our outline for today's show. I know you guys over at MacStories have started, I believe, your series. Don't you do that annual series?
Yes.
So you're going to be going through it all. But since we have you here, and Federico, for those who don't know, runs MacStories and is probably the most authoritative iPad user on the planet. I mean, you're the guy that Apple invites to the iPad events, and you've done some amazing iPad stuff over the years.
Thank you.
You do that annual iPhone and iOS and iPadOS review that everybody reads. So just real quick, you get one thing on the iPad this year at WWDC. What is it?
New multitasking.
Just a little thing.
I think that has to be just a little thing, you know, just that. But I really feel like, especially with iPadOS 15, right? Last year, they made multitasking easier and more intuitive for a bunch of people. And I feel like now that they have this more stable foundation, it's time to go beyond what is possible today. So beyond just two apps at the same time, beyond the limitations of slide over, to really approach, you know, multiple home screens and multiple displays like it's possible on the Mac. I don't know. I want to see Apple try something like Windows style multitasking, you know, with the snap style gestures, which is also something that you can do on the Mac with Moom and Better Touch Tool. You know, let me do a grid of 4 apps at the same time or 3 apps at the same time. Give me more controls. Like, really, you know, take advantage of that hardware in the iPad Pro and give some meaning, I guess, to the Pro in iPad Pro, because especially last year, the iPadOS updates were just foundational, really, to make sure that the basics are covered, that you have a new menu for multitasking, that you have basic support for keyboard shortcuts. But I feel like Pro users want and also deserve, right? Because you spend $1,200 on a computer that is called the iPad Pro. You want to make sure that you have some actual Pro features on it. And 2 apps at the same time, I don't think it's enough in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that broke my will was honestly them putting the M1 in the MacBook Pro because it raised my expectations. And I was like, oh, this is it. They're going to, we got the same chip as the MacBook Air. This is going to be awesome. And then they're like, hey, we added a button for multitasking, and I was just like that, it's like that combination of heightened expectations and lack of delivery. Just broke me. But when you say improved multitasking, does that mean at least 4 windows on the screen, or
So I'm really not a fan of, and I know this is going to upset at least a part of the audience, but I'm really not a fan of overlapping windows. I've tried them again, like these past few months that I've been using the MacBook Pro again. I just can't deal with them. I don't like them. I find them, I don't like the clutter. I don't like to manually resize my windows. I'm a fan of grids. I'm a fan of presets, have presets for 2 apps, 3 apps, 4 apps at the same time. Now, on the iPad, given the form factor, given that 12.9 inches is the biggest model, I'm not sure if 4 windows at the same time could work. Maybe yes, because of how iPad apps are designed with the compact size classes and the regular size classes. So maybe they can find a way to make it work. But for sure, at the very least, 3 apps at the same time, I think it should be doable. And I mean, if you ask me, I would do split view on the iPhone as well. I think that the times are mature enough to do 2 apps in split view on the iPhone, for sure on the bigger iPhones. But on the iPad, maybe not 4 at the same time, but 3 for sure.
Yeah, I would like to see them implement multitasking on the iPad the same way they implemented mouse support. Like delightfully iPad. It's uniquely iPad, but it still works. I felt like they nailed it with that. Maybe they can do something for multitasking too. Either way, I feel like it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens.
Yeah, I don't think there's a bunch of people that feel exactly like you that have been doing what we've been doing, like these new MacBook Pros that have come out, these new Apple Silicon machines, they have showed how they've made it easier than ever for long-time iPad users. And I know a bunch, right, that said, you know what, I'm just going to switch to this machine for a while and see what happens. A lot of iPad apps are now available on the Mac thanks to Catalyst or thanks to SwiftUI. There's been a lot of general cleanup in the Mac ecosystem, I feel like, because of Apple Silicon, right? A lot of apps that hadn't been updated in a while have received native Apple Silicon support. And of course, these machines are just incredible. Like the screen is beautiful and the battery life is incredible. So there's a ton of people in our community that are longtime iPad users who got tired of waiting forever for iPadOS to get better, and they've made the leap to macOS. But personally, and again, I think there's, maybe you also feel like this, David, maybe there's other listeners who feel this way. Deep down, we still love the iPad for what it is, right? It's a tablet that can also be a laptop. Like that aspect of the iPad is still so unique. And it's such a shame that Apple isn't doing more. But if they do more, I think the iPad will come back calling to us. I have this feeling that it really comes down to iPadOS 16, basically.
It's delightful. I mean, like I run my OmniFocus task review on my iPad, and it's one of my most enjoyable computing experiences that I do almost every day. Just the using my finger on a piece of glass, it just feels so connected. Like versus doing that on a laptop, it's just not the same. I agree. There's just not enough of those experiences, or there's things I need to do that doesn't. This is a constant thing on the show, but as soon as we started talking WWDC, I couldn't help myself but ask a little bit. And I'd recommend anybody who wants to know more about Federico's opinions on this stuff to head over to the App Stories podcast, which you and John Voorhees do an excellent job of. And I know you guys are doing. I haven't checked my feed, but I assume you're deep into that at this point, right?
Yeah. We have 2 more left to do: iPadOS, which is the next one coming out, and macOS, which we're saving as the last one. Yeah.
All right.
You got tvOS out of the way. That's good.
tvOS and watchOS 9 out of the way. We had to call in the expert Mike Hurley to talk about tvOS 16 because otherwise we had no idea. We had no idea what to wish for.
Yeah, he's the guy to talk to.
Well, I'm sorry, gang. I drug us down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but some announcements for the show now that we're 10 minutes in. So Stephen is coming to visit me. We're going to do some stuff on June 11th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. in the Burger Lounge in Irvine, California. It's a nice little area where there's parking and there's a lot of outdoor seating. We're going to have just a little meetup. Anybody who's in SoCal who wants to meet up with us, that's the day to do it. 8553 Irvine Center Drive. We'll put up some posts on the various blog posts and whatnot. There's a lot of food options there. The burgers at Burger Lounge are actually quite good, but there's like a Whole Foods and a whole bunch of other stuff there too. So whatever you like to eat, you can. My advice is you just tell your significant other, hey, why don't we go to Irvine for dinner? Let's go out for dinner. You don't have to tell that person that you're going to meet up with a bunch of nerds, just show up, it'll be a nice surprise. The other thing we're going to do is on Saturday, June 13th, we're going to record the Mac Power Users live. I'm going to put in the show notes a webinar sign up. It's going to be kind of like published as a webinar, but it's going to be a live show with me and Steven in front of cameras. We couldn't do a live show indoors just yet, but this is as close as we can get. And I think it's going to be really fun. Steven and I are working on the outline. We're going to have some cool stuff going on. So there's some things for your calendar. June 11th for the live meetup and June 13th for the webinar show, live show that anybody can attend. And that's, of course, free. And I'll get a link in the show notes.
Yeah, we're also going to be, while I'm there, recording our annual special. So right now is sort of membership season at Relay FM. You can become a member of more power users. You go to relay.fm/MPU. There's a couple of join buttons up at the top. That's an ad-free, longer version of the show we do each and every week. But all Relay FM members, no matter what show you support, get access to these annual specials. And ours this year is going to be, David, you and I are going to sort of recap my first trip to Disneyland. So we're going to go to Disney while I'm there. You're going to show me all the cool spots. And then the next day, we're going to record a little bit about how that trip went, which I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to bring out the boyish love side of Stephen. He's not going to be thinking about cable management. He's just going to have so much fun. We're going to get him some popcorn. It's going to be great. And today on More Power Users, since we've got Federico in the room, I have many questions about being an audiophile. I keep hearing these things about Federico and his expensive headphones and the ways he listens to music. We're going to get to the bottom of that on today's episode of More Power Users. Hey, so Federico, I guess I would normally say welcome to the show at this point, but I feel like we kind of already got through that.
Thank you, regardless. Yes.
But it is great having you back, and it has been a long time. So why don't we just start out with you sharing what Apple gear you are using these days?
Sure. I mean, obviously, starting with the iPhone, I'm a big iPhone guy. I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, biggest possible model. I'm using the Apple leather case, what is it, the black one, just because I've tried many cases for iPhones, both Apple ones and third-party ones, and I always go back to the Apple leather one. It's the nicest one that slides nicely into a pair of jeans. It doesn't have as much friction as the silicone ones, and also the Apple silicone cases are expensive. And they break up after just a few months for me. They always start to chip away at the corners of the case. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I really like how the leather ones age as well. And I like the feel. I'm not using, although I really liked it, but I'm not using the MagSafe wallet anymore.
What?
Yeah, and that's because COVID broke me. Like the whole pandemic broke me there, because basically the Italian government started requiring that in addition to your ID, for most things you carry around an additional card, which is like a health card, basically. Okay. And that is required for not just vaccinations and that kind of stuff, but also if you buy, for example, masks at a pharmacy, you get a discount, that kind of stuff. And so that brought a fourth card into the mix for me, because otherwise it was just my driver's license, my ATM card, and my credit card. And that was perfect for the MagSafe wallet, which I really, really liked. But with the fourth card, well, that was the single issue that forced me to stop using the MagSafe wallet, because it doesn't fit more than 3 cards. So now I'm using this wallet that I got from Amazon. I spent like 15 euros on it. It's one of those push out wallets that has like a little button that you press and it pops out cards. It's made of metal and the button is made of plastic. And it stores up to 4 cards, and it has slots for cash and an additional 2 cards. I don't love it, but it's functional. And ideally, I would go back to using the Apple one. But until that happens, I guess I'm stuck with the cheap Amazon wallet. I wish that I had a wallet with AirTags built in. Because the Apple one has the new version has the Find My integration, but that's not really like having an AirTag built in. It just tells you the last time you detached the wallet, it was here, and it's based on your iPhone basically. So like. I'm using AirTags I really love my AirTags actually. Like I have I have an AirTag on my car keys, another one on the house keys, and then I hid one in the car itself.
Sure.
And it's useful just for general, tracking my car and also remembering when I park the car. The Apple Maps integration there, that it tells you where you park your car by checking basically when Bluetooth was disconnected. It's not super reliable for me. I don't know, maybe it'll get better once I get a CarPlay enabled car, which I do not have. So it's not okay. No. So yeah, having an AirTag hidden somewhere in the car helps. And then I gave one to Sylvia, and she has one in her bag as well. So really love my AirTags. I think the time for changing the battery is coming up, actually. I think I got my first, hey, this is going to run out soon notification a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's been a year since AirTags came out. So, yeah, right about that time, I think.
Yeah, I'd never really thought about leaving one in the car, but I could see how that would be helpful if you park in like big lots or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes it makes a random noise when I start driving. Like it starts making the chirping, like the chirping noise for no reason. And I every time that I have someone in the car with me and they hear the sound, it's like, what's that? And I have to explain, oh, it's the AirTag that I hid, that for whatever reason, even though it's my AirTag and I didn't mark it as lost or anything, it's making a noise. And it stops after 10 seconds. But, I'll take that random noise over the convenience of just having that tracking built into my car.
One of the things I do with one, and Steve, I don't know if you did this or not either, but I took black tape and taped it to the underside of my bicycle seat. Because I don't want someone stealing my bike. And I felt like that was a pretty smart move. But either way, AirTags.
Yeah, I found this thing on Etsy. I'm trying to search for it now. Basically, it was like an AirTag holder for a bike. And I've got one on the bike that I ride most often, like leave it locked up outside a drugstore or something. And it's designed to look like a reflector. So it kind of 2 birds with one stone. And I like having one on my bike for sure. And
Federico, on the iPad, which iPads are you using these days?
Well, I would say that the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, it's still the iPad that I use the most. Like I said, in sort of over the past few months, and I'm working on this big story that I'm gonna publish before WWDC about like how I've been using the Mac again with the M1 Max MacBook Pro that Apple sent me as a review unit months ago, and it's been a long process, to familiarize myself with the Mac again. That has meant that I've been using the iPad less, basically. But when I do, I still like the big iPad Pro because it's the one that gives me the best version of iPadOS multitasking. As much as iPadOS multitasking is not great, but at least on the big iPad Pro, you get the most comfortable version of it. 2 apps at the same time. It feels like using 2 full-size regular apps side by side. And it's really it's a really great iPad to use in landscape mode with a magic keyboard, home screen full of widgets or full of icons. You get the best possible version of iPadOS. I would still love to get an even bigger iPad Pro, but that's a different conversation. I stopped using the iPad mini. I wasn't using it much anyway, and Sylvia wanted it, so I just gave the iPad mini to Sylvia. I have been using on and off the iPad Air as my media consumption iPad, just because I really find it uncomfortable to read articles and books at night on my iPhone. I don't like to do that on the MacBook Pro either. I really feel like the tablet is the best form factor for reading at night, just a couple of hours before going to bed. But the iPad Pro, the big one in portrait, is kind of unwieldy, as a thing to hold in your hands. It's a big tablet, it's a big piece of glass that you're holding. So the iPad Air strikes a nice balance between the size of the iPad Pro and the size and the lightweight form factor of the mini. I also like how on the iPad Air in portrait, it doesn't feel as cramped as the iPad mini. The iPad mini is a great device for portable, things, both in landscape and portrait. But iPadOS on the iPad mini, really not a good experience. Whether it's the home screen or slide over, it's really hard to use.
Yeah, a lot of it does feel a bit cramped. I mean, I've basically moved to the iPad mini as my only iPad, and I've just given up on multitasking because it's so cramped, and it's definitely better than the old mini was. I mean, the old mini was just like painful to use slide over and these other things on, but I feel like the iPad mini I think it treats you better if you treat it more like the traditional kind of one app at a time iPad.
Yeah, sort of like a big iPhone, basically.
Yeah.
And it's nice if you use it like that. But again, it's not like I was using it a ton and Sylvia wanted it anyway. So I was like, yeah, you can use it. I don't care. But yes, I would say that for the multitasking, I think the the big iPad Pro, still my favorite one. And that's the iPad that I'm still holding out hope for. Apple saying we're gonna let you do even more things on this device. This is the M1, right? The M1 version that you mentioned, David, and it's totally capable of doing more, right? I mean, this is the same chip that you can spend $1,000 and get a MacBook Air with the same chip, and you spend $1,000 and you get an iPad Pro, and it doesn't do nearly, not even half the things that a MacBook Air can do. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but that's the one. And I mean, I love the display, right? It's got the mini LED display, looks beautiful. It's not OLED quality, but close. And the speakers sound great. And I like the Magic Keyboard. I really like everything about its hardware. It's the software that's the problem.
Have you played with Universal Control in that big iPad?
Yes. Good. Thank you for mentioning that. Universal Control has been really great in allowing me to sort of have this one workflow, right, between the Mac and the iPad. And so many times I like to place the iPad next to the Mac, and it's like having an external display, but it's not a display, it's a computer itself. And so, being able to switch between what I'm doing on the Mac and something that's on the iPad that maybe is only on the iPad or that I prefer to do on the iPad. For example, some interactions in the shortcuts editor, I prefer how they work on the iPad than on the Mac.
Yeah.
Or maybe, something that the iPad does really well that the Mac doesn't, widgets on the home screen. Widgets on the Mac are terrible, but on the iPad, you can have these home screens that have medium-sized widgets and Excel widgets now, and it's really great to have this. And Stephen, forgive me for using this term, but having a dashboard of widgets right next to your Mac, but it's an iPad. And so you can have your timery widget for time tracking, and you can have a calendar that shows you 5 days, and you can move back and forth between them with Universal Control. It's really nice.
Yeah, I think I talk about this every week on Mac Power Users now. It's like the way we used to talk about the bad keyboards. Now I talk about Universal Control. But I've got the way my monitor is set up. I can actually put the iPad right below the monitor. And between Universal Control and Sidecar, I use my iPad so much now, just as a dashboard. I mean, Steve and I have talked how much we would like to see some sort of dashboard come to Mac OS, but I, in essence, have it now with the little screen below my Mac on an iPad. It's really dramatically increased the iPad usage for me. I love it.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by 1Password. And 1Password version 8 for the Mac is now out. If you haven't checked this out yet, you really should. It's faster and more responsive across the board. Everything you do is going to be quicker in 1Password 8. It also brings a lot of new features if you, like me, have multiple accounts. You can now lock or unlock individual accounts. So maybe you want your personal vault unlocked, but not your work one. You can also create vault collections, which are ways to group and view certain vaults across accounts. I've really come to enjoy this. I can very quickly see all of my shared vaults in one place without having to do a lot of clicking around. Everything is just easier to use and faster in 1Password 8, like I said. Another example I really like is you can easily scan QR codes for adding 2FA for a login. You've been able to do that in 1Password, but now it is lightning quick. My favorite feature, though, is universal autofill, which will let 1Password log into apps directly on your Mac. Just this morning, I needed to run some updates in the Mac App Store, and it prompted for my Apple ID password. Well, friends like you, hopefully, that password is not something I can easily type. It's a 1Password generated password, but I could autofill it with 1Password right there. It could see what was on the screen. It could fill in the password just like I was using my browser. It was awesome. 1Password 8 is now in beta for iOS and Android as well, with those releases coming later this year. Go check it out and learn more at onepassword.com/MPU. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial there, and you'll get 20% off when you sign up. That's onepassword.com/MPU.
Okay, Federico, you were teasing us that you are using your Mac more than your iPad. And I was thinking, wow, that's new, right?
Well, times change. And,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So first, what Mac hardware are you using? I think you referenced an M1 MacBook Pro, but give us the details and tell us how it feels coming back to the Mac.
So this is the 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. It's a review unit that Apple sent me 6 months ago. And they were like, we kind of want to give you this and see what happens. And I told them, look, I'm into this as an experiment, but I want to tell you up front, I don't know what will happen. I don't know how long it's going to take me. I haven't used a Mac as my main computer in almost a decade, really. But I'm fascinated by it, and I want to try it. But basically, this is not a commitment to anything. And they're like, yeah, sure, this is why we're giving you one as a review unit. It's like, okay. So it's been challenging, especially the first couple of months, when I sort of had to force myself in a good way to use something that was so completely different from what I had been using since 2013, really, 2012, 2013, as my main computer. And the first couple of months, especially the first month, like November and December, it was challenging because I had to unlearn and relearn a bunch of things, right? Especially for multitasking. Like I spent the first month basically trying to make my Mac look like an iPad, right? And that's not totally surprising, right? You're switching to an iPad, to a Mac from an iPad. You try to make it look like the thing that you know and that you are familiar with. And so I tried to replicate my same setup with, an empty desktop, which is like the home screen. And then sort of I made workflows in Keyboard Maestro to replicate like the behavior of split view on iPadOS, and I tried to create these shortcuts to do apps like in slide over, so these narrow columns on the side of the screen. And I wasn't really using keyboard shortcuts much, and I wasn't really taking advantage of all the other things that the Mac has to offer. And then I realized, I'm approaching this the wrong way. I'm doing this all wrong. And because I wasn't really taking advantage of all the fantastic features that macOS has to offer. And I was trying to force this machine into being something that it's not. And so something clicked. I don't know when, but basically I've reached this compromise, this trade-off. And I really like where I am right now and where I've been for the past couple of months, which is I have accepted that I don't know if it's the past decade of working on the iPad, or maybe it's just who I am. But like I mentioned before, I really don't like overlapping windows. I'm not that kind of computer user. I don't think I've ever been. I don't like to manage windows that are overlapping with each other. I don't like to manually resize my windows. I like to have multiple windows. I like multi-window. I just don't like to see the clutter. And in accepting that, I've been building shortcuts and using Mac apps that let me create those grids, right? Those layouts that I like to use. So that's the single most important thing that I've been accepting about myself and learning about the Mac and building with shortcuts to have these presets for two apps two apps on screen at the same time, or 3 or 4. And I've been using shortcuts with its resize window action. I've been using Better Touch Tool, which you guys have mentioned on the show many, many times. Dragging a window on one side of the screen resizes the window to fill half the screen, that kind of stuff. And I've been really digging deep into Raycast, the Spotlight alternative for macOS, because it's got these amazing built-in window management actions. So you can assign an alias or a keyboard shortcut to resize the frontmost window to a specific area of the screen. And they have so many options. Like you can do top 3/4 of the display, or bottom left 1/6 of the display. Like they have these wild presets. And so I've been really working on that. And then I've been progressively, again, relearning things about the Mac that I knew years ago, that I kind of forgot over the past decade, and then now I'm appreciating again in a new way. Like for example, AppleScript. I used to be huge on AppleScript many years ago, and then workflow. First editorial and Pythonista happened, and then workflow, and then shortcuts. Now shortcuts is on the Mac, but AppleScript can be part of a shortcut. And so it's been fun to look again into AppleScript, but make it part of my shortcuts. And then just those things, like menu bar apps, using hot corners, having the freedom to use even more plugins in Obsidian, like all those things that make the Mac a Mac, but I guess done from the perspective of someone who used the iPad for a decade. And I'm sure that having done that, altered my perspective in some very specific ways, like overlapping windows, big nope from me. And I'm still struggling, for example, to use multiple desktops on my Mac, just because it's something that I haven't done in a decade. And so I know that the feature is there, but I keep forgetting about it. So it's been a long process, but I really like where I am right now.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there, so I want to back up a little bit. The first is, one thing that's changed, obviously, since the last time you used a Mac is Apple Silicon. And it seems to me like for a lot of folks, maybe one of the reasons why so many of us are willing to punt on iPad for now is because, Apple Silicon brings a lot of the traditional iPad features to the Mac. The battery runs pretty much all day. You open the lid, it just turns on. They still don't have the cellular radio, but, largely it is giving us a lot of the features that we love about the iPad. And of course, that's where the movement is. That's where the action is right now coming out of Apple. For so long, the Mac just sat in the corner while everything was happening with iPhone and iPad. But suddenly, the action's on the Mac side. So I get that. But I do think that I'm sure that's a role that plays a role for you, right? Because you can see that right now Apple is innovating on the Mac, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, having the same performance and battery life, and just even what seems like a trivial thing, but like I open my computer and it wakes up instantly, and I don't see apps bouncing in the dock anymore, like exactly like on an iPad. Like that feels great, and it wasn't the case for the Intel Macs years ago. I had a 2011 MacBook Air, and then I got a 2018 Mac Mini as sort of my podcasting machine. And like those computers were slow, like and things would take a while to start up, and it just, you didn't have that kind of performance. You didn't have that level of, oh, this is nice, and you have multiple. Like I still have multiple of those, oh, this is nice moments on this MacBook Pro. So Apple Silicon, by far, I honestly think like it's like the greatest thing that happened to the Mac in ages. Like having that kind of performance, and these machines never run too hot for the things that I do, and the fast charging, and the fact that I can use the same apps that I have on my iPad, whether it's thanks to Swift UI making it easy for developers to bring apps to iPad, or Catalyst enabling that sort of translation from iPad to Mac, or like worst case scenario, I can install in emulation mode an iPad app from the Mac App Store, which is not great, but it still works. Mm-hmm. And I have some apps like that. Like that freedom, that flexibility has been incredible. And so when you combine that level of power and that performance with the fact that it's a Mac and it lets you do whatever you want to do with your computer, meaning no restrictions. You can install apps from the web. You can install video game emulators. The computer trusts you to do what you want to do with your computer, and you trust the computer. You trust Apple to protect you in case things go wrong. And that's a beautiful thing, to have performance combined with that freedom. That's the thing that has made the difference for me.
And it opens up the automation stuff. We're going to put a pin in automation for a second. I want to come back to that. But there is just obviously way more automation available to you on the Mac than there is on an iPad. But then you get to this thing, and I want to have a little bit of an intervention here with you, Federico, okay? I want to tell you, nobody's listening, don't worry about it. It's okay not to have overlapping windows. I don't either. I don't like the mess either. Everything to me, the last time I sized a window with a mouse, I can't honestly remember, because to me, it's all automation based. I push a button, the windows put themselves where they belong. I don't think about it.
Perfect.
It's okay, man. It's all right. You're not. I think a lot of people listening are probably the same as you. The overlapping windows to me is like, when you go into a desk and you see papers all over the desk. It's like that. I can't deal with that. I need it clean.
Guess, some people are really religious about this. Like, oh, window management means you can place your windows freely anywhere, and you should be taking advantage of that. Sure. And I mean, if it works for you, great. I also think that it depends on the kind of display that you have, right? I'm using a 14-inch MacBook Pro. I guess if I had a 13-inch display or something, maybe I would think about this differently.
No, you wouldn't. I guarantee you wouldn't. I have a 32-inch screen. I won't overlap windows. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But I think it's looking at those overlapping windows, like it bothers me visually. Like it really bothers me. So yeah, but that's the thing. On the Mac, you can have an opinion about these kind of things. You can say, well, I don't like it, so I don't use it. Or you can say, no, I like it. I like all my windows to overlap. And I want to, have these cascading windows that overlap with each other.
Yeah.
The Mac allows you to have an opinion on how you use your computer. The iPad mostly doesn't. It doesn't let you have an opinion. It's either Apple's way or no way.
The way I size my windows, there's like a 10-pixel gutter between them, like at the major, like down the center, across the middle. And like if I have a window open and I see something in that gutter, I get mad. I don't even want. I'm so meticulous about window management.
And you do all that with automations, right?
Yeah. Keyboard Maestro, Moom,
Nice.
shortcuts, a better touch tool. There's about 7 different ways you can do it, and it sounds to me like you're exploring them all.
Yeah.
Federico, you mentioned the ability to run iPad and iPhone apps on the Mac. Has that actually, like day to day, made a big impact on how you use the Mac, or do you view those as kind of nice things to have, but maybe mostly holdover?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a big impact. Like that feature is the emergency exit, right? For when you really need to have something, but there's no other way. Like I think I needed to have like this very particular utility for multi markdown tables, maybe. And then it was the other one was just like an Italian app that didn't have a native Mac version. It's not a big impact, but it's nice to have the option when you really need it. Like, it's not a good experience. Like you can't really resize those apps, and they obviously look weird, right? When you're using them on a Mac with a cursor, and they've been optimized for touch, and you can't touch the screen obviously on Mac OS. But no, I don't think a big impact. A big impact, Catalyst apps for sure. Like those apps have had a big impact on me, if only because Catalyst has allowed developers of apps that I was using on the Mac to arrive on Mac OS. Like Timery is my favorite example. There are other ones that I don't recall. Like the Timery one for sure, like is the single most important app that has come to the Mac because of Catalyst. Like having that same time tracking workflow with my existing save timers and my existing widgets on the Mac, that's been terrific. So I would say Catalyst has had a big impact, but the emulation mode, that's kind of like using iPhone apps on the iPad, right? There's that one particular app that you really need to have, but you could probably live without it. It's just nice to have the option.
Well, it really is. It's a great time to be using the Mac. And, it's funny because we were talking a few years ago, like, is it going to continue to be the Mac power users if Apple stops making Macs? We weren't even sure if our show name would last, right? And they really have done a great job with it. Where do you miss the iPad the most when you're using your Mac?
Well, I'm going to be one of those people. I'm going to say I miss touching the screen. Like,
Sure.
honestly, I really feel like sometimes being able to touch something and have that thing react on the display is great. I really miss, the touch interactions, but more sort of high level. I think the reason why I can't really stop using the iPad is it's the iPad's nature itself. It's the modularity of the iPad. That's what I miss. I miss having a computer that changes, right, based on what you're doing with it. So you have this core that if you place it in an accessory, it becomes a laptop. And you use the Magic Keyboard, and you have a laptop. It's got 5G built in, beautiful display, right? And you have a trackpad, you have a keyboard, you have a pointer, and you can use it as a laptop. But then you can switch orientations, and you can take it out and it becomes a tablet. So you can put it on a stand and you can use an external keyboard, or you can just hold it in your hands and it's a tablet. And you can use it in portrait, you can use it in landscape, you can watch videos, you can play games. Like having that sort of ever-changing nature is what I miss the most, and why I hope that my story and that the story of other iPad users now turned into Mac users can be a wake-up call of sorts for Apple to because what I'm saying ultimately is I still so strongly believe in the iPad as a concept, as an idea. Like that's the part I miss the most, because my MacBook Pro, I love it, but it's always gonna be what it is, which is a laptop, right? The most I can do with it, I guess, is put it in clamshell mode and use it with an external display. I can't rip out the display from a MacBook Pro. It's not a tablet. I would break it. It's always going to be it's a laptop, and it cannot be anything more than a laptop. But the iPad can be multiple things at the same time. The problem is that if you have a device that you are expecting to be a laptop, a desktop workstation, and a tablet, it better excel at each of those three types of computer. And right now, I really feel like the iPad only excels at being one type of computer, which is a tablet. And because most of my working days, I want to work on a laptop, what is the best laptop, functionally speaking, that Apple makes right now? It's the MacBook, whether it's the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro. So the iPad needs to get better at being not a tablet, basically. It needs to get better at being a laptop with the Magic Keyboard, and it needs to get better at being a desktop workstation when you put it on a desk, on a stand, or on a dock or whatever, and you connect an external monitor, keyboard, and trackpad. So there's two roles that Apple needs to think about for the iPad, because only one of the three right now the iPad is really optimized for, has long been optimized for. The iPad has long been an excellent tablet. And so that's what I miss. The modular nature of the iPad and the freedom to, have one computer that can be multiple things. The Mac can only be one thing, but it's a really excellent thing at what it does.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by SourceGraph. Go to about.sourcegraph.com to get universal code search, allowing you to move fast even in big code bases. So you've hired a brilliant developer. That's great, but now you have to get them on board. If your company is growing, onboarding new developers will be a common occurrence, but it's a big undertaking each time. One of the biggest challenges for new hires is to get up to speed with the project their new team is working on. This can be tricky if the code bases your developers are working on are already large. Thankfully, SourceGraph makes it easy to move fast, even in those big code bases. Developers know that knowledge is most useful when it's findable. Centralization is helpful, but given the fact that most companies store knowledge in at least 2 different locations, how do you make knowledge accessible to those that need it? As a code intelligence platform, SourceGraph gives developers what they need to drive their own learning over time and in different situations. Teams without SourceGraph need to rely on asking colleagues or reviewing out-of-date documentation, which is cumbersome and time-consuming. But with SourceGraph, every developer can search across millions of repositories to find specific code, saving time for themselves and everyone else. So when questions do come up, you know it's the big stuff that's worth the extra time. SourceGraph was created to make developers' lives easier, and today they work with leading companies across every industry, including 3 out of 5 of the top tech companies, plus PayPal, Uber, Plaid, GE, Reddit, and Atlassian. Visit about.sourcegraph.com to learn more. Once again, that's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world use SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Or just click the link in the show notes to let them know you heard about it from us. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
Federico, I think that discussion about form factor and even differences in the operating system is it's so fascinating, right? Because the iPad started life in such a different place than the Mac did, and now they're sort of on these weirdly parallel tracks, but not really. And I'm curious. I mean, you talked some about the physicality of things that make up the difference between these platforms, but what are some other differences between them that maybe hold the iPad back or hold the Mac back in different ways? Where do you see some of those differences playing out in your own work?
I've really seen, for the Mac side, I've really seen the lack of cellular networking being an issue for me. I spend a ton of time working in my car. I know that there's a bunch of people out there like me. I have these moments when I'm waiting 30, 45 minutes in the car and I want to do something, right? I want to get something done. I'm not at home. I don't have Wi-Fi. Now, normally with an iPad Pro, I wouldn't think about it. There's a 5G SIM card in it. I can just use 5G. The MacBook Pro does not have cellular networking built in, so I have to use personal hotspot. And that's fine, but I don't love it. It's one extra step. It's not always reliable. I don't know why, but it's been well over a decade. I think the personal hotspot existed on the iPhone, and sometimes I still get those errors, like I couldn't connect, or no network found, or I don't get it. So the hotspot is what I've been doing, and it's fine. But then again, I would prefer to have the thing built in the MacBook Pro. So that's one thing I've been missing for sure. And also, like as I mentioned, the physicality of it. Sometimes I just want to be on the sofa and just to hold my tablet in my lap and use the touchscreen. Can't really do that with the MacBook. But with the iPad, also, I feel like when it comes to doing laptop things, uh, there's a ton of different things where the MacBook is better. Like, for example, viewing angles, right? The Magic Keyboard has very limited viewing angles for when you want to tilt and adjust the display. The MacBook doesn't have limited viewing angles. It lets you tilt and adjust exactly how you want your display to look. Now, it doesn't fold all the way back like some Windows convertibles that I've seen. Those laptops that let you push the display back until it becomes like a flat device, basically, and you can fold the keyboard in the back. Like the MacBook Pro doesn't let you do that, but it still lets me adjust the display with many more options than an iPad Pro. The keyboard is better. The keyboard has an extra row that the Magic Keyboard for iPad doesn't have. So I have those media keys for music playback controls, for brightness controls, and that's so much better than having to reach out to open Control Center on the iPad. The trackpad is bigger, right? So performing those 3-4 finger gestures on the MacBook Pro, so much more comfortable than trying to do so on the iPad Pro's small trackpad that is built into the Magic Keyboard. Now, I get it. The Magic Keyboard has a small keyboard and a small trackpad because of that floating form factor. But then again, I wonder, is that the only form factor that you can try for a 13-inch laptop? Maybe there are some other options that Apple could explore. And I think, Stephen, we mentioned this on Connected before. I would love to see Apple, sometimes we use this expression on Connected, get weird about accessories. Like, do a bunch of wild and weird accessories for the iPad Pro. Let's see what sticks. Let's see what happens. Like, do multiple keyboards. Do multiple versions of the pencil. I don't care. Like, go wild with those accessories, because the iPad is really, to an extent, the iPad is what you pair with it. So give me more options to pair with my iPad Pro. So yes, those I think are the, hardware-wise, the biggest differences. And obviously there's a whole other conversation to be had when it comes to the iPad doing laptop things in software.
Yeah, so what are those things for you? Because I suspect that if that's like your stumbling block, really, isn't it? I mean, if suddenly you could record your podcast on your iPad, would you still be using the MacBook Pro?
I think recording podcasts, probably the most important one, just because podcasting is basically half of my week. And so having a reliable environment for plugging in my audio stuff and, ensuring that not only can I record my local audio, but also I can record a backup of the call that we're having, whether it's on Zoom, Skype, or Discord. I need to have that backup. And to save that backup in a location that I can control, and that I can, also back up to Dropbox. Like, all that kind of stuff is essential for my work. So that's certainly a factor, having a proper environment for audio. The iPad doesn't have any of that. But also window management and file management. And I know that file management is not an exciting thing, right? It's kind of it's boring, but it's an important thing. It's one of those essential tasks that a computer needs to take care of in a reliable way. And so, Finder, maybe not the best file manager around, maybe not the most exciting one, but it does a few things that Files still doesn't do. Like, for example, smart folders, or my favorite, quick actions in the Finder inspector with shortcuts built in. And I've really been taking advantage of this feature where I can use my shortcuts in the context of a Finder quick action. You get this in the inspector. If you select something like a PDF or an image, you get this in the contextual menu when you right-click on a document, and you get the quick actions right there in the contextual menu. So having my shortcuts available there has opened up a whole new dimension for how I can speed up some key tasks. And of course, window management. Like, I'm on a laptop, I'm working at my desk, I'm doing a bunch of things. Maybe I'm in my car, right? Maybe I'm on the sofa. I just want to quickly manage my windows. I want to place this one on the left, this one in the top right. The Mac lets me do that, as you mentioned, David, with Keyboard Maestro, which, by the way, as we're recording this, I just saw that Keyboard Maestro shipped version 10.1 with much, much deeper shortcuts integration. So I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah.
So the Mac lets me do that. I have macros in Keyboard Maestro. I have my hotkeys and aliases set up in Raycast. I can manage my windows by just pressing a button. And the iPad, I'm like, okay, time to do the drag and drop dance again, and I'm limited to 2 apps at the same time, and I gotta use slide over. It's slow and inefficient. And also, I think I would mention automation, because shortcuts on the Mac has really opened up a whole new world for me in terms of how I can optimize the hundreds of shortcuts that I build every year. And I think it's the same for you, David, obviously.
Yeah.
We've been building these shortcuts for iPhone and iPad for the past 8 years. And with the arrival of shortcuts on the Mac, now, of course, the first version was not great in September, right? It was buggy and crashy and full of glitches. Wasn't great. But it's been getting better, like really getting better on each release. And now that I have it in a stable form, more or less, this freedom is great. Being able to create shortcuts for Finder, for shell scripts, for Apple script, it's terrific. And it would be hard to give up now that I'm getting used to it.
Yeah, another whole point of the shortcuts being on the Mac that I don't think has got enough attention from folks like us is that a lot of traditional Mac developers who never really got into writing automator actions are suddenly building automation into their apps,
Yes.
And this was just not the case before. And Apple's made the bar just low enough for those folks to be able to get in and build, even if it's rudimentary, but some sort of automation in. And that, to me, is something that, you were never going to get with something like Keyboard Maestro. As much as I love Keyboard Maestro, people are not writing actions in their apps for it, but they will do that for shortcuts.
I think another thing that's so encouraging about it is that they preserved a lot of the legacy automation tools on the Mac. You don't see things like Apple Script or shell scripting on the iPad and iPhone, but they pre-existed shortcuts on the Mac, and Shortcuts has adopted a lot of those technologies. And I'm curious, Federico, like, what sorts of things has that unlocked for you in terms of automation that just weren't feasible on iOS or iPadOS?
Yeah, so window management for sure. Well, I've been using all these shortcuts that allow me to. One of my most used shortcuts is called split view presets. So that's basically a way for me to define combinations of apps that I use together on a regular basis. That's exactly the kind of thing you can't really do on iPadOS with shortcuts. So, for example, I have the shortcut that brings up a list, and this list is, a list of app combos. So like Safari plus Obsidian, or Messages plus Twitter, or Safari plus Mail, like all these presets. And all I need to do is select them with the arrow keys and press return, and those two windows open side by side thanks to Shortcuts find windows and resize window actions.
Yeah.
One of the shortcuts that we selected as one of the category winners for Automation April, made by Chachad, called Snap. Snap is this incredible Mac shortcut that shows you these icons for different window sizes. It's like presets, but to the next level. You have all these beautiful icons for like half of the screen, or bottom left corner of the screen, or center of the screen. And you just hit one of those icons, and the frontmost window resizes to match that window layout. Like, that kind of stuff is incredible. And I wish that it was also possible on the iPad, but it's not. So that's one type of automation where shortcuts on the Mac has really opened up a whole new world for me. I would also mention the beautiful combination of the old world of scripting and the new world of shortcuts. For example, I put together these shortcuts that I can run from the menu bar or with a hotkey, where I can, for example, show and hide some elements of Apple Music on the Mac, like, for example, lyrics or the Up Next queue. Like, you can combine AppleScript to show those windows, those sidebars, with shortcuts. And so that combination, I think, is a really beautiful thing. Combining visual actions with scripting technologies, and the result is really greater than the sum of its parts. And that's been really fun for me to dig into and put together these shortcuts that combine scripting with visual stuff. It's been really fun. And lastly, I would mention, and again, it's probably, I think, not totally original, but it works. Finder, having access to the Finder, but really combining the Finder actions in shortcuts with what I do in Obsidian. That's come really in handy. We made a plugin for Obsidian called Obsidian Shortcut Launcher. And that plugin allows you to run a shortcut from Obsidian, right? When you do that on the iPhone and on the iPad, Obsidian launches the shortcut in the Shortcuts app, because that's all it can do. But when you run that plugin on the Mac, the shortcut is called in the background, right? The Shortcuts app does not launch in the foreground. You stay in Obsidian, but you can run a shortcut. And that's possible. That's possible because on the Mac, the shortcuts can run in the background thanks to shell scripts, right? So that's what our plugin does. It fires off a shell script. But what I've been doing there is, thanks to this plugin and thanks to shortcuts on the Mac, I created this system where I can easily create a backup in multiple locations of an article I'm working on. So I just need to press a hotkey in Obsidian, and it launches one of the commands of Obsidian Shortcuts Launcher. Obsidian Shortcuts Launcher passes the file path of the current document to Shortcuts, and then Shortcuts takes care of creating multiple copies for me. And that's easy, right? Because you can just say, okay, create a copy in iCloud Drive, create a copy in Dropbox, create a copy in GitHub using the working copy GitHub client. It's really easy. But that combination of, like, there's the Finder, there's Obsidian, there's shortcuts, you can glue them all together in this very reliable shortcut that I use multiple times a day, and that I will make sure to use thousands of times for my iOS review this summer.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say for the audience that Federico brought up Obsidian, not me.
Yeah, I take full responsibility. It's my fault, yes.
As a proper host now, I need to engage with this. No, honestly, the automation with Obsidian on tools outside of Obsidian on the Mac are amazing. Mike Schmitz gave me the idea of using Obsidian with Hazel. So now I put in the YAML front matter, I have a status field. And like, if I'm in the folder where I keep active blog posts and I just change the status to published, Hazel sees that and then moves the file to somewhere else in my Obsidian database for me. I don't even have to write an automation in Obsidian. Hazel does everything in the background. But those are just all these automation tools on the Mac that you can bring to bear on an application that is fundamentally a folder full of markdown folders. So anything you can do with a file, you can, automate in that application. It brings me no end of delight when stuff like that happens.
Well, you're doing it next level though, with the YAML from matter and the status fields in there. Like that's something that I want to look into more this summer, especially when I will be working on the iOS review with multiple chapters and sections for each chapter, because I think it'd be helpful for me to combine those status fields in the YAML front matter with something that keeps track of which sections I'm done with and which other sections need more work, for example. So I still need to think of a system there, but I know for sure that this year, because I'm working on the Mac, I will be able to do the kinds of things that were not as easy before with the iPad, right? I mean, unless things change with iPadOS 16, obviously. But like I mentioned, creating multiple backups, or even things like turning local attachments in my Obsidian drafts, like turning local images into image links stored on our CDN. Like now that's something that I can totally do with shortcuts, because all I need to do is read the local file path of the image, turn that image into an image that's uploaded somewhere, and replace the local reference with the public URL of that image. Like that workflow is now something that I can do. Or I can do shortcuts to, take my compiled copy of the iOS and iPadOS review and turn it into a PDF or something that I can share with my friends if they want to have advanced, early access to, a particular chapter, for example. Like all those kinds of things, because of the freedom that you have with shell scripts and Finder integration in shortcuts on the Mac, they become so much easier to use with Obsidian and shortcuts together. Now, obviously, I would love to see all this on iPadOS 16, right? I think at a very minimum, I think Apple should make it possible for users and for developers to run shortcuts in the background with an API, just like you can on the Mac with the shell. Now, on the Mac, you can use the terminal and you can just, type in shortcuts run, name of your shortcut, and the shortcut will run in the background. Now, obviously, I don't expect Apple to bring a terminal to iPadOS, but I think there should be an API for developers to say, I want to run this shortcut that the user has in the background, and I don't know, retrieve the output of that shortcut. Like that's a thing that should be possible. Yeah. And if that ever becomes a reality, I could see apps like, say, Obsidian on the iPhone and iPad saying, well, now you can also run shortcuts in the background, and there's a plugin for that. And we're not using URL schemes anymore. We're not, doing the back and forth between Obsidian and shortcuts. Now, I mentioned Obsidian because that's what we're talking about, but it could apply to anything else, right? So at a very minimum, there should be an API to run shortcuts in iPadOS 16 in the background. But yeah, once you combine the words of Obsidian and shortcuts, crazy things can happen.
This is the problem with having Federico on the show, because now you get me excited about the iPad again, and you're trouble. I'm going to send you a video I made for the Max Market Labs members where my kind of active organization system in Obsidian might be useful for your review, but I'm using data view in Obsidian to look at contents of specific folders and auto-populate those on an index page. Like it's kind of like what Nick Milo would call a map of content, or I think you have a name for it too, a page where you've got like a home base, but mine is automatically generated based on where the files are located. And then when I change the YAML front matter, the Hazel will move them to different locations, so they would automatically depopulate from the active projects page or whatever I'm doing, depending on what I'm doing inside the file. I'll send you a video. It's cool, and yes. It's just, but it all gets down to the fact that I'm using an application that has a completely transparent file system. So anything that you can automate, you can affect the application data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think we went down the Obsidian rabbit hole. I'm sure I'll get a few emails. Obsidian's a weird topic because when it comes up on the show, we get email from people saying, "I love that. I wish you would talk more about it." And then we get email from people saying, "Man, I'm just not interested. I wish you would shut up
Yeah.
about it."
Yeah,
So
it's a
hard.
very polarizing piece of software, but that's when you know there's a great product in there somewhere. Because if it elicits that kind of feeling like, oh, I love it, or no, I really hate it, you know that it's something that stands out. Right, so you either love it or hate it, and it's I don't know why you can really hate it. I guess you can be tired of the conversation around it, which is fair, and it's fine. Which is why I will not bring it up anymore.
I don't think people hate it. I just think they're not interested. You know,
they're not interested, which is again fine. Again, that's the beautiful thing, if anything, of the past 2 years. When it comes to software, when it comes to productivity software, there's been this renaissance of these kinds of apps, right? Just because we've been stuck at home looking at our computers, figuring out ways to make those computers better. And so we really are living a golden age of note-taking apps and, PKM apps, obviously. Like, there's such an abundance of options, and it's a beautiful thing, right? Not many of those will stick around for decades to come. I think Obsidian is one of those. Obviously, Notion is another product that I think will be around for a while.
There's
Craft, obviously, if it doesn't get acquired by Apple, which is a long-running theory that I have that will happen eventually.
If Craft gets acquired by Apple, I hope it's like the workflow acquisition where they keep the team together and just build it in. Boy, that could be something that pulls me away from Obsidian if Apple took over Craft and made it really good. Yeah.
But anyway, you can be tired of Obsidian, and it's fine. But more broadly speaking, I think it's just fantastic how many options we have right now for note-taking apps. I think two spaces are really exciting again right now: note-taking apps and read later apps. I don't know why, but also like the read later space, there's things happening again. There's Readwise, there's, the folks at Matter that recently launched the version 2. And I'm seeing this new generation of iCloud-based read later apps that are popping up on the App Store every few weeks. I don't know. Again, possibly a result of the past 2 years. We've all been just wasting time on the internet, saving articles for later. And many of us realized, oh no, this app that I'm using for reading stuff later is terrible. Let me build my own, or let me look for an alternative. So it's nice to have this sort of excitement about apps again.
I would add to the list that I think home automation might get a lot more exciting soon as well if everybody goes in on this universal platform. So
yes.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by Electric. We've all served as tech support for friends and family, right? I mean, I just had a phone call this morning from a family member who didn't know why their iPhone wasn't audibly ringing. They had put it in Do Not Disturb accidentally. Anyways, easy to fix. But look, when it comes to work, you're focused on building a business, and you won't always have time to jump to the rescue when there's a tech issue that needs solving. This is where Electric comes in. They know small businesses face challenges with IT. That's why they've solved this problem for you by operating as your IT department. Instead of spending time sorting through unused application licenses or setting up employee laptops, answering questions, you can focus on your business. With Electric acting as your IT department, you can get back to what you're good at. Plus, you get a really great IT platform to see and manage everything. Delegation is hard in small businesses. Trust me, I know. But as you grow, it's so critical to let experts come in and take parts of your responsibility and run with them. And that's where Electric can fit in for you. For MPU listeners, Electric is offering free Beat Solo 3 headphones for taking a qualified meeting. Go to electric.ai/MPU. That's electric.ai/MPU. There's a link in the show notes to get your free pair of Beat Solo 3 headphones for scheduling a meeting. Our thanks to Electric for their support of the show and Relay FM.
So Federico, we talked about a lot in the last segment, but you also threw out the carrot of Raycast. And Stephen and I are thinking about maybe doing some content on that in the future on Mac Power Users. So we've both been running it now for a couple of weeks. And I know you're really into it. Tell us about Raycast and why you're excited.
It's exciting because it's an application launcher that thinks the way I think about launching stuff. So, and I'm gonna. It's difficult to describe this kind of utility on a podcast without having the video component, but I'm gonna try. So there's plenty of spotlight alternatives on the Mac, right? You have Launch Bar, you have Alfred. Years ago, I think it's still Steven. Is it still around? Quicksilver? Is it?
I think it is still around. I heard somebody mention it just the other day that they were still using it. So I think it's still kicking.
Oh, don't tell me Quicksilver still works. You guys are gonna mess me up.
I think you, Steven, shared a tweet of someone who said that anyway. It's still around. And then, of course, you have Raycast. So what I love about Raycast is some very specific small features that, taken all together, they really make this product special. So, first of all, it's really fast, right? You can search for anything, whether it's a file, folder, app, whatever. And it's really fast. Performance is terrific. You can mark any result as a favorite. Your favorite results, they float toward the top of the Raycast window. So if you have stuff that you frequently launch, like, I don't know, Safari, or a folder, or a particular shortcut, you can make those items favorites, and you will, when you open when you command space, because I assigned Raycast the same shortcut as Spotlight, when you command space, you see those favorites right away. So you don't need to search for them. You can just, arrow key down and select them and go. I mentioned shortcuts. Raycast can run individual shortcuts from the Shortcuts app, obviously in the background, because this is a macOS app. But what you can do for your shortcuts and for any other result in Raycast is you can give it an alias, meaning you can give it like a nickname, and a hotkey. And these hotkeys, I have found them to be more reliable than the hotkeys you can set up for your shortcuts in the Shortcuts app. Sometimes I press a keyboard shortcut and I'm sorry, but everything is called a shortcut. I press a hotkey for a shortcut that I set up in the Shortcuts app, and it doesn't do anything. I tried the same hotkey in Raycast, and it works 100% of the time. So those hotkeys that you assign in Raycast itself, they work system-wide, and they are super reliable. Then, what I really like is some types of items in Raycast support interactions. So Raycast is extensible, like Alfred, like Launchbar. You can install extensions. There's an extension, quote-unquote, store that you can browse in Raycast. There's an API. Developers can make extensions for it. It's all open source, and you can check it out. You can go in and browse and install the extensions you want. Some of these extensions are built in, and one of them is the Reminders one. The Reminders extension transforms Raycast into a view into your schedule. It shows you all of your upcoming reminders organized by day. When you select a reminder, there's this global hotkey in Raycast, which is Command K. Command K shows you a context menu for the selected item, and it changes based on the item you have selected. So if you select a reminder in Raycast and you press Command K, you will see options for marking it as complete, or changing the due date, or changing the priority. If you select a calendar event, which is also something you can search for in Raycast, and you press Command K, you will find the option to reschedule, to open in the calendar app, and like other things that are specific to the calendar. This Command K modifier, it's global to Raycast, and it changes depending on the kind of result you have selected. Like
it also works in contacts too. And
yes.
It works, yeah.
What I also really like is the just the sheer amount of extensions you have. There's a clipboard manager, and it's really nice. It does what I wanted to do, which is it shows previews for text and images that you've copied to the clipboard. And it even shows you which app you copied from. There's a bunch of metadata. And of course, if you press Command K, you will get some additional options, like you can turn clipboard items into snippets. You can do all those kind of things. There's a built-in emoji viewer, right? So you can view a grid, like a large grid of emoji, and you can search by name. And of course, you can select them all with keyboard, and you can press Command K to get more options. So that's also really nice. I don't know. I guess those are really the things that I love the most. For me, it was the built-in window management features, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, marking results as favorites, and the super fast and reliable shortcuts integration. Raycast is my number one interface for running shortcuts on the Mac, whether they are marked as favorites, or I give them a hotkey, or I give them an alias, but it's super fast. It's what Spotlight should have been for shortcuts, but it's not. And I really like how it dynamically ranks results over time. So if I run a particular shortcut that starts with the letter S, that will be ranked more highly than, say, Safari. But that changes over time. So the app kind of learns from your habits, and it ranks results differently. I don't know. It's really well designed, fast, updated frequently, and they recently rolled out their paid thing, which is a subscription plan for teams. The idea being that you can share snippets and other macros and settings in a team of people.
And then the one I would add to that you mentioned in the last segment is the crazy number of window management options they have.
Yes.
Like there's one called Almost Maximize, which is exactly what it sounds like.
There's one called Reasonable Size, which is a reasonable size for a window. That was also very funny. And it's nice because you can go into so you open settings and you go into the extensions tab, and you will see all your scripts, because of course you can run scripts, commands, extensions you've installed, and you can press the plus button to add more from the store. Like that's where I found the Obsidian extension, which is also a nice one. And I promised I would. I'm sorry, I'm mentioning Obsidian again, but you can search your Obsidian notes, and you can open a specific note in the Obsidian app immediately from Raycast. There's so much, there's an Apple Music extension. There's an extension for Bear, the note-taking app. You can create bookmarks. There's wild things in the extension store. I have considered making my own Raycast extension at some point. I'll have to look into that.
It is like really coming on hard. I mean, it's like there are Alfred and Launchbar have been around a long time. They're both very good. There are some things I can do in Alfred that I can't do with Raycast, but it's just shocking to me how fast these extensions are getting on. It does remind me of Obsidian, and I'll take the heat for that mention. In that, like, you've got this community going behind it and just like filling in things that are showing up so fast. I am really impressed with it for something that, how long has this app been around? I only heard of it like 3 months ago.
I think a year.
Yeah.
For sure it was around last year. I think it was the WWDC sponsor of, was it on MacStories or something else? For sure it's been a year, maybe a couple of years.
Well, it's really arrived.
It's been picking up lately, just because like I think folks have realized, this is actually very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, the community aspect around it is what's most impressive to me. I mean, you have that with things like Launchbar and Alfred, but I think the folks who are building stuff to use with Raycast are really fired up about it in a way that maybe those other platforms don't enjoy anymore. And it's exciting to see. I mean, just in the, 3 or 4 weeks I've been running it on my Mac, it feels like it's new things are happening in Raycast world all the time.
Yeah. What I will say that Launchbar gets exactly right about its shortcuts integration that Raycast doesn't, and I hope they copy that feature, honestly, is from Launchbar, you can select a shortcut, a result from the Shortcuts app, and you can pass input to the shortcut from launch bar. So you do this by searching for a shortcut. Then once you've selected the shortcut you want to run, you press tab, and when you or space, I don't remember, but you press one of those keys, and the launch bar lets you type in some input text, and that input text gets passed to the shortcut. Meaning, if you have a shortcut that you're using to capture ideas into Obsidian or Craft or Apple Notes, whatever, you can capture that idea right from within Launchbar, because you just type the name of a shortcut, then you tab, you type the idea or the thought you want to save, you run the shortcut, and that text that you typed in Launchbar gets passed as input to the shortcut. That's a fantastic way to take advantage of passing input to a shortcut on the Mac, and I wish that Raycast had the same option. And I brought this up to them, and hopefully it'll get added at some point.
Okay, guys, wait a second. I have an announcement. I might be using Raycast a lot more, because if you open Raycast and you type toggle lightsaber, your Mac makes the lightsaber sound and your mouse turns into a lightsaber.
Really?
How did you even come across that? Are you just typing lightsaber into various things on your computer?
Yes, everything that I search, I always start with lightsaber.
That's amazing.
I was looking through the action directory, but
oh my God, it really makes a loud noise, though.
I know.
Wow.
I know, but I mean,
did you just open Raycast and search for lightsaber?
Well, I was just looking through the action list here as you were talking, and I'm like, toggle lightsaber. Wait a second.
Incredible.
Okay, man, Raycast, you are pushing all of my buttons right now. Okay, well, this app is we're gonna cover it more. Like I said, I am pretty committed to Alfred, because like I've built a lot of custom actions in Alfred, allow me to search specific folders and do all kinds of cool stuff. It's like the integration in Alfred with OmniFocus is killer. But I need to dig in on this, because it seems like there's a lot under the hood here.
Yeah.
And I haven't paid for it. And now you said, so they have a model where they're going to have like teams can subscribe. It actually worries me, an app like this, if there's no model for it. Like, how do they keep the lights on?
Yeah, I kind of wish that they let me pay as an individual user, honestly. Like, let me pay for premium stuff. And right now they only have like a Teams-based subscription model, which is okay. And that's one of the things that is my biggest concern about Raycast. They're the kind of company that I believe they took VC money as an investment, and obviously they are, they want to roll out these plans for business customers, right? Which we see these kinds of companies do. Like, for example, look at 1Password, which I love, but obviously, it's that kind of company where you have to roll out plans for the enterprise, for business customers to justify having these pricey subscription costs. Personally, because I love the product so much, like, yeah, they've taken VC investments. Like, I don't care. The product itself is amazing. So I wish that they let me pay for it. Like, even just a personal subscription, I don't know, $20 a year or something. Like, I'd be down for that. I would prefer to pay as a single user myself to get access to premium stuff. And maybe that's happening down the road. I honestly have no idea. I don't really know these folks.
Yeah.
But the product, I mean, it speaks for itself. It's really well done.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by ZocDoc. Find the right doctor right now with ZocDoc. Just go to ZocDoc.com/MPU and sign up for free. Finding and booking a doctor who's right for you doesn't need to be a terrible experience. Will they take your insurance, understand your needs, or be available when you can see them? With ZocDoc, the answer can be a refreshingly pain-free and simple yes. ZocDoc is a free app that shows you doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them. You can read up on local doctors with verified patient reviews and see what other real humans had to say about their visit. So when you walk into that doctor's office, you're set up to see someone in your network who gets you. Go to ZocDoc.com, choose a time and slot, whether you want to see the doctor in person or do a video visit, And just like that, you're booked. Find the doctor that is right for you and book an appointment that works for your schedule. Every month, millions of people use ZocDoc. In the chaotic world of healthcare, let ZocDoc be your trusted guide to find a quality doctor. Not so long ago, we needed a doctor in the family, and the list we got from the insurance was not up to date, and it was madness. So we just got on ZocDoc, found ourselves a doctor, and got taken care of very quickly. Anybody who is struggling to find the right doctor and trying to figure out how this whole insurance thing works should check out ZocDoc. They take care of all of it for you. So go to ZocDoc.com/MPU and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/MPU. That URL, one more time, is ZocDoc.com/MPU. Our thanks to ZocDoc for their support of the Mac Power users and all of Relay FM.
Federico, we like to end our interview shows, our time with our very special friends, talking about some favorite apps or services that maybe you're using that we haven't gotten a chance to touch on yet. So what are some things that are making Federico Viticci's life a little bit better?
So can I mention some Obsidian plugins?
Of course.
And then I'll skip to the actual apps. All right. So I mentioned Obsidian Shortcut Launcher. That's the plugin that we made at MacStories. It lets you run shortcuts in Obsidian. Go check it out. It's free, open source. You can actually take a look at the code we're using. So, but I also want to mention Hover Editor. This is one of the latest entries in the Obsidian plugin community. It's incredible. Like this plugin, it opens a mini editor floating window every time you hover with the cursor over a link to a note in Obsidian.
So it's like, is it kind of like Quick Look and Finder where you can just kind of see into something but not actually navigate to it?
But that's the thing, you can see. So when you hover over, double square brackets over an internal link, you see the preview. But the plugin is called Hover Editor because the window is actually editable. You can click in and you can make changes to the note you just opened in the floating pop-up. And you can open multiple of those floating pop-ups and you can drag them around and you can pin them on screen and you can basically spawn multiple of these floating pop-ups in Obsidian and make changes, and those get reflected in the document itself.
Okay.
So it's preview and editor all at once. It kind of feels like this is a plugin that will be Sherlocked by Obsidian eventually. And the Obsidian folks, they do this, of course, with permission from plugin developers. Some really popular plugins become built-in Obsidian features eventually. And I really feel like this is one of those features.
Yeah, Stephen, they've had the ability to preview with Hover for a long time, but this lets you actually go in and change things.
Yeah.
And,
okay, so this is
crazy.
like an addition to what they're doing. Yeah, that does seem like it's right for Sherlocking.
Yeah. And the other plugin that I recently started using is called OmniSearch. This is an incredible search plugin based on a different search algorithm from the one used by default in Obsidian. And I prefer, two things about it. The performance, I think it's really great. It can search your entire vault in less than a second. It indexes hundreds of notes in like 400 milliseconds for me or something like that. And results are ranked based on multiple criteria. You can go in and read the detailed documentation for this plugin. But basically, I like how there's two modes. You can search your entire vault or you can search the current document. And I prefer how it supports fuzzy search, how it ranks results based on how many times a particular word or sequence of characters appears in the document. It's really fast, super reliable. Try it for yourself and see if you prefer that one to the built-in Obsidian search for, especially the vault search for searching for particular strings of text in a particular document. I really like how this one works. Now, that's enough for Obsidian plugins. I will mention some apps now. Matter, the Read Later app, recently came out with version 2. I like how they dropped all the social stuff they were doing, and they literally wrote in the announcement post, we realized that the social stuff was a distraction for our users, and so we're dropping it. We're not doing it anymore. And so what is left is a really excellent read later product that supports, as this beautiful text parser, supports highlights. It can sync to a variety of services, including Readwise and Obsidian, but also lets you listen to an article rather than just read the article. And they have this really good text-to-speech engine that lets you listen to a spoken, obviously spoken by a robot, but still spoken version of an article. Again, same concern as Raycast applies here. How are these folks making money? Not clear right now, but the product is really nice. But it's free, so we'll have to keep an eye and see how this thing actually grows over time, and if they start, if they become profitable. They seem to be committed to building like this sustainable product long term, but those are just words. We'll have to see. One of my favorite indie developers lately is Marcos Tanaka. Marcos Tanaka, you may know, he's the developer of the Music Harbor app. Music Harbor is an app that is like the missing utility for Apple Music. It shows you a list of new music releases for every single artist in your Apple Music library. Now, Marcos Tanaka has been on a grind lately, and Marcos has first released Play. So Play is a utility that lets you save YouTube links for later. And this is the kind of app that I've always wanted to have because I really dislike the watch later playlist in YouTube.
Yeah, me too.
With Play, you have this app that is on iPhone, on iPad, on the Mac, and of course, because it's YouTube videos, on the Apple TV. It syncs with iCloud, and it lets you save links in a bunch of different ways. You can paste the links, you can use a share extension, you can use shortcuts, you can use a widget, you can use whatever you want. And those videos, they sync across devices. It's especially nice on the Apple TV because then when you select a video on the big screen, it kicks off, the YouTube app. But also, there's this incredible feature, which is auto tagging. You can define rules to automatically tag your videos with different tags and therefore have different categories if specific keywords or other types of metadata are found in the title of the video. So, for example, I set up auto tagging for Pokemon. So all Pokemon videos that I save, I don't need to tag them myself. They get auto tagged by Play because they have Pokemon in the title. And you can, of course, have multiple conditions. Super well done. So that's Play for YouTube. But the same developer, Marcos Tanaka, is coming out soon with another kind of app that I've always wanted to have, which is, imagine Read Later, but for music, right? So this upcoming app is called Music Box, and Marcos has been kind enough to run a beta program in our Discord for Club MacStories members. And Music Box is basically Play, right? But for Apple Music and Spotify content. So you can save your Apple Music links or Spotify links for later, and you can organize them with tags. And of course, you get access to all kinds of different metadata, right? Such as album, artist, label, release dates. You get shortcuts integration. So you have actions to save or retrieve music. You have Shazam integration on iOS and iPadOS now. Thanks to, this is one of the few examples I've seen of the Shazam Kit API, meaning you can use Shazam inside Music Box and it recognizes the song that is playing for you and it saves the song for later. So you can listen to later. I've always wanted to have Read Later, but for music. And this one is coming out like in a week, I think. And it's going to be, I think it's very high on the list right now of my 2022 apps of the year. Like It's going to be incredible. Some existing apps that I also want to mention, 3 more. Remind Me Faster. This is a very simple utility for iPhone and iPad to quickly save tasks in the Reminders app. It's a Reminders client that is like, imagine if drafts and reminders at a baby. This is just like a scratch pad for saving reminders into specific lists with support for natural language dates, locations, and priorities. That's all you can do. There's nothing else you can do. It's just an empty text field built specifically for reminders. Super great if you want to save like multiple reminders in a row without having to speak them to Siri or using the reminders app. The next one is very specific, and I'm sorry, but I have to bring this one up because it's one of my recent discoveries. If you play competitive Pokemon, which is something that I do online, there's a whole... David, I don't know if you're familiar with this. Steven is, because we forced Steven to listen to these segments on Connected.
Yeah, here it is again. You followed me over here.
There's a whole world of competitive Pokemon play, both online and now, it's been 2 years, but like in-person tournaments are coming back.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with it. I'm not into it, but I get it.
Yeah, and Pokemon is a really complex, actually, role-playing game, right? There's a ton of different stats and numbers and potential combinations of teams you can design. And I have found this really good-looking native client for iPhone and iPad called VGC Helper. VGC stands for Video Game Championships, which is the format that Nintendo does for competitive Pokemon play. And this VGC Helper app is really like a beautiful native app for iPhone and iPad that lets you manage your team, check out statistics for individual Pokemon, check your resistances, your weaknesses. Super well done. I love the design. And I want to mention this because it's hard to come by websites or apps for competitive Pokemon that are also nice to look at. A lot of the most popular websites are fully functional, but quite ugly. And this one is really well done. And lastly, of course, back to more traditional stuff for Mac users, I gotta mention CleanShot X. I love CleanShot on the Mac. This is one of the apps that has defined my past few months in, getting used to Mac OS again. I just love all the little things that CleanShot can do, whether it's hovering over the screenshot thumbnail to copy or save the image, the built-in annotation tools, the fact that it can hide my icons on the desktop, the fact that it can turn a screen recording into a GIF right away. There's so many different options that CleanShot X has. And I know that Apple will never match the functionality of CleanShot in their own screenshot tool. But man, I really love this one. There's so many different, so many keyboard shortcuts and so many different options. So I want to shout out to CleanShot because it saved me so much time over the past few months, and I'm gonna be using this a ton in the summer.
I bet. Now, does that mean that you're gonna do your epic review of Mac OS as well? Just gonna do both of them?
No. I'm sticking to iOS and iPadOS, but I will be writing that review on the Mac. So, but yeah, I'm gonna be writing for sure more about shortcuts on the Mac. So that's what I'm planning to use CleanShot for. A lot of my writing for shortcuts has included the Mac version lately, just because that's where the audience is. That's what people want to know, and so I will be writing about shortcuts on the Mac, but I will leave the Mac OS review to John. I will still be taking care of the iOS and iPadOS one.
All right. So, Federico, people can find you at MacStories.com or .net, right? .net.
Yes.
Sorry. MacStories.net. And on Twitter, you are Viticci, correct?
Yes. That's VITICCI.
2 C's. Anywhere else people should look for you?
Got the same username on Instagram, and I occasionally post pictures of either headphones, video games, or my dogs.
All right. Well, the dog pictures are great. I love those.
Thank you.
We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. Thank you to our sponsors today, 1Password, SourceGraph, Electric, and ZocDoc. And we will see you next time.